I think blinks are powered by crypto, but we believe that they are things that are generally needed for the internet. The URL is this element of shareability that was like one of the best designs of the internet from 40 years ago, maybe more. Why did we not actually upgrade these things to give them the ability to share experiences, let people take action? None of this happened. And part of the reason I believe that's true is because authentication on the internet is generally broken. Crypto and the wallet as the cryptographic key pair is this profound new way that we authenticate and prove who we are on the internet. It makes it possible for us to take action on anything from anywhere. And that's just this incredible new primitive for us to build with.
This episode is brought to you by Access Protocol. You'll be hearing more from them later in the show. All right, hello and welcome back to another episode of Lightspeed. I am Jack Cubanek, co-hosting with Mert. I am not Dan. Dan is out right now on paternity leave. He's a dad. Congratulations, Dan. Big moment for him. But yeah, I'll be taking over co-hosting duties alongside Mert. And for the first episode we're recording, we have a real treat. We're going to be talking about one of the most exciting new things that's happened in the Solana ecosystem recently, Blinks. And joining us to talk about this, we have Jon Wong from the Solana Foundation and Chris Osborn from Dialect. Chris and John, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you, Jack. It's good to be here.
Before we begin talking about Blinks, let's first have you, Chris and John, intro yourselves. You're pivotal players in Solana. Not often the loudest on Twitter, but quite important pieces nonetheless. So, Chris, do you want to go first? Intro yourself, what you do, what Dialect does, and then John, same.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. And yeah, thanks for having us on. I'm Chris. I'm the founder and CEO at Dialect. At Dialect, we power alerts and now also very critically actions and blinks. So we're a bunch of the technology and implementations around blinks today. And we're also core contributors to the action specification alongside Solana.
Hey, everyone. My name is John. I'm the head of engineering at the Solana Foundation. Work a lot on technical primitives, things like compressed NFTs, token extensions, and now actions and blinks. Been here for a couple of years now, working on everything on Solana. So it's been exciting to be able to work with folks like Chris to make things like actions and blinks a reality.
Great. And I guess I'll throw myself in there too, since this is the first time listeners have seen me. But I'm a journalist at Blockworks, and I produce a daily newsletter about the Solana ecosystem that's also Lightspeed branded. And now I'm going to be co-hosting the podcast. But yeah, Chris and John, I'm just going to dive in with a quick overview. So late June, the Solana Foundation and Dialect announced Blinks. And they were basically this way to take actions, which allow like a blockchain transaction to turn into a URL, the way I think about it. And then blinks, which is like this mixture of blockchain and links, are the way that actions can be unfurled. And this basically, like to the user, looks like there's buttons on your Twitter feed where you can do things like buy meme coins or a whole bunch of other things. I played like a really bad version of Pokemon once as a blink. That was a good time. And yeah, it's created a lot of excitement just kind of on Twitter. But I want to throw it to you, Chris, for the first question. This came out as, okay, like the first surface is Twitter. A lot of the crypto online discourse happens on that platform. But the goal is to move this to other surfaces of the internet, to have blinks be a much more kind of universal thing. So what are you working on these days? And what platforms are we going to see blinks start to move to after this initial deployment on Twitter?
I think the answer here might depend on the problems that folks are trying to solve. And generally speaking, any early stage initiative, like a startup, otherwise like our collaboration with Solana Foundation, you really want to make sure you get your foundations right before you spread yourself too thin. And so generally speaking, I think the interest is still really in how do we solve for like the experience in like the town square for crypto, which is crypto Twitter. So I think we still have a lot of work to do to make that better. So But it's by no means like the only service that we're looking at. Today, Blinks work on web, on desktop, in a browser where you have a Chrome extension installed that supports Blinks. And thankfully, these are the Chrome extensions that everyone in crypto uses, which are the major wallets like Phantom, Backpack, Solflare, now including some other ecosystem wallets like OKX and Bybit, and more coming. But like, you have to be on web. You got to have this feature enabled in the Chrome extension. I think just making discoverability so that your average user can discover these incredible experiences easier, and deepening the experience by making the Blinks capable of a more and more interesting variety of experiences. It's at least like my bias where I want to be spending my time. There's one other thing that I think is really critical, which is mobile. We can get into this or not on this episode, but the thing that makes it possible to deliver a Blink on Twitter or on web is not in the same way possible in, say, Twitter mobile. And so as a result, we're looking at a totally different kind of user journey. And if you say that the point of Blinks is to really narrow the gap between a call to action and an action itself, it's just going to get solved in a different way where the end goal is seamlessness and speed. And so just a couple of days ago, we launched a mobile SDK for Blinks at Dialect. And we're hoping to see a lot of the mobile apps, and I'll say the mobile wallets that everybody has installed, having a more native Blinks experience directly within the wallet. So it could end up being that you see a regular link preview on Twitter mobile, you tap it, and it deep links into a mobile wallet with like almost like your signing sheet. It would first be a Blink sheet directly within the wallet. You just take the action, you're set up, you're ready to go. But that's just like, again, just like a narrow path on success. Like, how do we turn calls to action into actions? That's really like the mission here. And the surface gets huge. Like, there's so many other sites and experiences. There's Web3 native dApps that are beginning to explore like SocialFi products that want to just bring Blinks directly natively into feeds or into chats, all that stuff. So there's a lot going on, but we're trying to just really get the core experience right for now.
Well, and let me just follow up quickly on that, Chris, because if you're able to really do this to get the mobile SDK up and running, and there's all sorts of places where you can find Blinks, like just in your sort of pie in the sky version of events, like how could this sort of change the way that people interact with the internet if Blinks catch on in a really major way down the road?
I think Blinks are powered by crypto, but we believe that they are things that are generally needed for the internet. Like, the URL is this element of shareability that was like one of the best designs of the internet from however long ago, 40 years ago, maybe more. And the link preview is arguably like, it's just like this incredible thing that was developed in the last 15 years. I don't think gets nearly enough credit for just how profoundly it makes the internet shareable. And then it just like stopped flat. There's like 3 or 4 types of link previews. And I don't know if you've ever noticed that with Open Graph, they've got like a Twitter specific link preview. Like, link previews for Twitter have a specific different set of metadata. It's like, why did we stop there? Like, one, why did we not actually upgrade these things to give them the ability to share experiences, let people take action? None of this happened. And part of the reason I believe that's true is because authentication on the internet is generally broken. You're kind of signing into individual apps. You have these siloed experiences. Crypto and the wallet as the cryptographic key pair is this profound new way that we authenticate and prove who we are on the internet. It makes it possible for us to take action on anything from anywhere. And that's just this incredible new primitive for us to build with. And that's very much like our mission at Dialect for the 2.5 years or so that we've been working on problems related to actions and Blinks, have been around this idea. And so that's what I want to see, is like unfurl the internet, break down the sort of tyranny of like, you have a new idea, you want to launch a startup, you're like a dev or a founder or something, you got to like build a whole website, get people to sign up for your product or build a mobile app. Like, no, just share experiences in places where people are already engaging.
I think the last thing I would add there is like the actions ultimately are the workhorse here. Like, Blink's cool, they make things look easier to interact with, but ultimately I think being able to expose all of these different actions across different protocols and dApps, that's the only possible in blockchain part. Who knows if this is actually only possible in Solana in particular, but the fact that all of these protocols and dApps use Solana, the blockchain, as effectively the message bus, right? Or the commitment to a transaction being finished and all that sort of stuff, works uniformly across governance, across games, across payments, any single one of these teams will have the exact identical API. And that's truly unique to blockchain because, you could have a more actionable link, open link preview, open graph type thing, but beyond the authentication, the actual API and the database that's ultimately stored in is going to be completely different between every application. And we have a really interesting, unique opportunity to showcase something that is truly blockchain native.
Fragmentation is a big problem for Ethereum, but also for the subscription industry. We all know the pain of tracking which subscriptions you're paying for and the hassle of trying to cancel them. Well, Access Protocol is here to help with a new way to consume content via staking. It's built on Solana and gives you an easy solution to stay up to date on what's happening in the industry by giving you access to your favorite publishers like CoinGecko, CryptoSlate, and a whole list of independent creators. The ACS token, that's the Access token, is staked to gain access to all of that creator's content without the hassle of managing a subscription. If you want to give it a try, check out the link in the show notes to claim a free NFT that gives you access to a creator's content.
That's all quite exciting. Obviously, it made quite a big splash on Twitter. And by the way, I think you guys maybe shortcut yourselves on the intro. For those who don't know, Chris is also a PhD in physics from Columbia or something crazy, and a repeat startup founder. And then John basically makes everything happen on Solana. So these are some serious people building serious things. The one thing I thought was interesting was about the mobile experience being different in how you now have to release like a mobile SDK. And fundamentally, this the idea itself is grand and ambitious and pretty revolutionary, I would say. But the devil is you need to get developers to adopt it. And so I run a developer company myself. So I'm curious, how do you think about acquiring developers to use this and getting them onboarded? What's the go-to-market?
I'll talk a little bit about the back end part first, and then Chris, maybe you can talk about the front end part. But the fact is, like, every single protocol and team on Solana can use actions, just the API part of it today. And I think taking that logic that you're otherwise doing to construct the transaction that you're already doing in the JavaScript on the front end, you can put that in a server. Now it's portable. And now you can invoke that via maybe a widget that's deeply embedded in a mobile application. Maybe that's a button that shows up on, some embeddable button on someone's HTML or something like that. But that thing can also be represented as a QR code and now can be invoked remotely from a mobile device. So that same uniform API just works across every single protocol, as long as they adhere to the hey, this is a transaction that ultimately we're going to wait to see that it gets confirmed before proceeding with the rest of the logic. But Chris, you can talk a little bit about the front end and how that changes across different platforms.
Maybe just a quick backstory here on adoption so far and the excitement that we've seen. Mert and Jack, you're right. There's been incredible excitement and engagement around this. John and I had the plan of one wallet, supporting web for launch. And we were very fortunate to have both Phantom and Backpack, two incredible teams that really moved mountains to hit the June 25th launch. Then we were let's say 5, we were 5 to 10 people building actions. And this is, I think, your question, Mert, of how many people are building with this technology today. And we had about 10, really great lineup, people who just got it and worked with us and shipped in time for launch. And then, John, you had set the goal of let's have 100 actions by breakpoint. Let's aim for 100. We had 100 within the first week. It was just instantaneous. And as of today, I think 5-ish weeks later, we're at over 300 Blinks developed and just more coming every week. We're at 5 wallets have already integrated this technology in their Chrome extensions. And now numerous wallets are looking at these new mobile SDKs for bringing this. So Mert, I don't know if this fully answers your question from the adoption perspective, but this is a product market fit question. I don't know that there's user product market fit yet, as is the case with a lot of things in crypto. But there is this just simmering, long-standing interest in this kind of technology from developers. People want to build with this. Devs want to express themselves with this technology. And it's been incredible to see. And then to double click on what John was saying, part of the reason I think there's already hundreds of these things is because they're easy to build. And so the actions specification is the distinction between actions and Blinks, which John was getting at. It's really easy to build with these, incredibly easy. And so people can get these things spun up in a couple hours and then use them to a variety of different purposes, including the delivery of Blinks. That's correct.
I wonder too, I used to cover hiring at Blockworks before I was more on the Solana beat. And I remember talking to like a talent acquisition person who was saying, and this was, I don't know, beginning of 2024, so things might have shifted, but he was like, look, there's just not enough Rust developers out there. Like Solana companies are trying to hire developers and they just don't have enough people. We're kind of like already approaching the bottom of the barrel and the market is still going up. And so I wonder if, something like Blinks that creates a lot of collective excitement that people are talking about online that you can experiment with. I wonder if that like drives new developers into Solana as well, because it just gives them like a project, something to focus on. I wonder if that'll be a downstream effect of Blinks as well.
I'll let you in on a dirty little secret. I don't fully believe that you need to be a Rust expert in order to do and make a huge impact on Solana and the ecosystem and build a lot of interesting things. Case in point, myself, I don't think I have anywhere near an expert's level understanding of Rust. I can read code and stuff like that. I'm an engineer. I've been one for a decade. But in terms of like understanding how things fit together and being able to build and deploy and deliver great product experiences, you can do a ton of that with JavaScript. You combine that with the fact that you can reuse smart contracts on Solana, and things like tokens are just a transaction away. And then you have RPCs like the Heliuses of the world that make it really easy to display all this information. And then you add in actions. Absolutely, Jack. I think like the time to developer success on Solana is actually going to be drastically shorter because now you don't even have to build a DApp. You just need an API. You need to know a little bit about Solana, and that API is going to use Solana Web3.js anyway, and you can get to market on your platform of choice, or in this case, X.
One thing I'm interested in actually talking about adoption. So we went from like 10 actions to 300 actions. And we'll get to how the protocol works specifically. But every time there's something like this, there's kind of this tension between, okay, it's a standard, but there's a company, and how does the company make money? Do they need to make money? How does that work? How should we think about the business model?
To answer your question, Mert, is I'm going to like say something a little bit spicy here, but I think in Web3, there is just this like incredible chronic inability to understand the relationship between protocols and businesses. Like Web2 is full of them. We have decades of examples of how great technology companies are built on top of open source protocols. And I think in Web3, there's a tendency of teams to think the protocol is the thing you productize and monetize. And I think that can make sense with like a lot of protocols that are very financially oriented. Like that's certainly possible. But with something more like actions, which are more of a protocol in the traditional kind of like Web2 or internet sense, that should always be free and open for anyone to use. And so the example that I would give here briefly is like the metaphor for me is there's Git and then there's GitHub. And you think about all the things that have nothing to do with the actual Git protocol that GitHub solves that makes Git usable on a daily, weekly, monthly basis across entire organizations, like literally like powers how developers collaborate today. And then another slightly different example would be OAuth, meaning open authentication, which like powers all sign-in today on the internet. Versus like Okta or Auth0 and like the actual like services that those companies provide. And so you can very much think like, yes, we're core contributors to the specification. Yes, we worked like right alongside John and the Solana Foundation, Nick Frostbutter and others to design, and we're going to continue to work to design the specification, but it's very clearly a Solana specification. I think the ecosystem is in a really strong position as a result of that. And the technology is too. And then we're building the technology stack on top of that. And today that's mostly open source SDKs where you can get a full Blinks client experience in your wallet out of the box in like under 30 minutes. Like all the complexity that's coming with really clean, like under 50 lines of code kind of thing. But it's going to turn more and more into like everybody's asking us like, how do we track analytics? How do we know who's engaging with our Blinks? Like all this other stuff. There's just like whole entire technology stack to offer there.
And so how do you think through that timeline of like moving from the protocol to the business on top of the protocol, Chris?
I think it's just like trying to solve problems for people every day as fast as possible. So there's just like I actually think a really close marriage between the two right now. I'd love, John, for you to share a little more about like what's coming with the action specification, but we launched this MVP and everybody lost their minds over it. We can barely do anything. Now we have all these incredible changes to the specification. And at Dialect, we want to make sure that like you just version bump your SDK with us and boom, you get it all out of the box. There's a ton of cool stuff coming, John, if you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like I liken this to the very first iPhone was pretty crappy. It's a touch screen. You could just send messages and phone calls and stuff like that. Internet wasn't really a thing then. But I think the kinds of things that you want to be able to express have come out of people actually using the specification and the tools. And I think that it ultimately was why we didn't like hold on this. Like this is the fastest thing I've seen get to market. As soon as the ideas came together, it was like, okay, like bat out of hell, like let's get this thing in front of people, let's learn from this stuff. There's two very key like improvements that I think will help allow for more expressive products that are coming up soon. One of them is message signing. So right now, every Blink that you see is anonymous. You don't, it has no understanding of you. And actually that's a privacy, there's a good reason. There's a privacy reason. You don't want to leak your public key to all of these things just as you're floating on by, right? Before you actually interact with it. Message signing allows you to opt into that, to provide your public key and some authentication that you actually own this particular key, which then the Blink provider can use to surface something more personalized. For example, Tensor might say like, here are the trades that you can do now as a result. That's pretty cool. That leads right into the second piece, which is actions chaining. And actions chaining lets you perform a series of transactions, and they might be across different protocols. But ultimately, the idea here is that once you do something once, you may need to do something else, you may need to do something else, but each level can be customized. You can get the results of the previous thing. So the canonical example here that we get, and shout out to Spaceman Dev, who's been pushing this on the games front, is like ride the bus. Ride the bus is drinking game with cards, but ultimately it's like every stage of the game is you want to have that in the same place, and you want to keep progression through all of those things. So lots of cool use cases that we see from both of these particular specification changes.
Would the message signing have some idea of like persistent sessions, or would you have to resign?
Yeah, we're baking that in. So, you might be able to save like your session for that particular action just so that you can have that personalization that goes through. Still figuring that part out, but I would say, yeah, it's just like a really cool mechanism. Drip is the other obvious use case there where they need just a little bit of authentication in order to perform the action.
Cool. Okay, well, actually, so I want to turn back time and start from the beginning because first, this was called Solana Pay, or I think it was at least, or I'm not sure what exactly changed on top of that. So let's start from day zero. How did this evolve? What happened? What did you see on the market that you were like, maybe we should actually generalize this more?
Yeah, great question. I can start from the top here. So a couple of years ago, Jordan Sexton at the time was at Solana Labs and focused on working with the payments teams to try and figure out a better mechanism for communicating information to a remote signer. The English version of that is you go to the point of sale, you want to pay for your coffee, your wallet's on your phone, and you want to be able to sign and send a transaction from there. So the very first version of Solana Pay was just a transfer request. It was just saying, hey, this SPL token, this amount, and then keep track of it. Soon thereafter, Jordan was interested in a more general purpose version of this exact exchange and created something called a transaction request. This transaction request is forms the basis of what actions looks like, but at its very minimum is one, share some metadata about what you're about to do, and second is an API where you hit it with a post method. It gives you back the transaction to sign and send, which in this case was still used in the context of Solana Pay. The reason why they wanted to add this was so that you could, for example, check the wallet for NFTs to see if maybe they have a loyalty card and then give them a discount at the point of sale, something simple like that. But even in the docs, you could see, this was 2 years ago, there was one exact bullet point that says, you could use this for more than payments, right? But when you have a protocol thing that is called Solana Pay transaction requests, you're only ever going to get payment type use cases. Fast forward, maybe I can't exactly pinpoint exactly when it is, but 2 companies started using the Solana Pay transaction request spec to inform interesting Solana action transactions that were not payments related at all. Phantom used it for their NFT shortcuts thing, and which allowed you to you stake your NFT or something from the Phantom wallet. And of course, Chris and Dialect used it for all the smart messages inside of Dialect itself. So those were the first two really prime use cases where it was clear that you could do a lot more than just payments with this particular spec. But fast forward even more to the beginning of this year. And in my head, as I've been talking to a lot of these payments and commerce teams, it was clear that there was a lot of these people wanting to use, obviously, the transaction request spec. But I think the thing that kind of like opened things up for me was like understanding that a QR code, ultimately that point of sale QR code that kicks off the transaction request, is itself a URL. Right, like if you were to just scan it and translate to a string, it's a URL that says Solana : / and some API that you hit that returns back the transaction to sign and send. That obviously can be used generically for any kind of transaction. You combine a lot of these together, and the very first version of this idea was not that interesting, but it was like, hey, if you can take that URL and put it as, say, a query parameter, now you can like make a portable transaction. Like this endpoint is going to give you back a transaction. You can put that anywhere. This was cool. This is an interesting idea. It means that you can share an action that's sort of a very portable thing. And to be clear, we weren't looking to, and we still aren't looking to deprecate or override Solana Pay. That's still going to be a separate product, right? But we wanted to rebrand, at least take the transaction request spec since it was already built. I brought that to Chris. Chris obviously has been using a form of this for smart messages for the Dialect Messenger, and we were kind of riffing on it. And there was something interesting here, but it wasn't like immediately, okay, this thing, we got to it wasn't clear that this was the most dominant thing. We shopped it around. I went to Token 2049 Dubai, and I was just like sharing this cool idea about being able to share transactions and URLs, and some people got it right. I talked to An from Super Team Vietnam, and he kind of got it. And then 2 days later, he comes back and says, one of my devs said, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if you could make it a more interesting UI?" And I was like, you could do that, but then you would be forced to install an extension, and no one's going to install an extension. Like no normal person does that. And then the light bulb of, wait, every single person in crypto already has this extension. It's their wallet. And that I distinctly remember the first thing I did, I slacked Chris. I said, figured it out. We got it. This is it. And
I was like, yes, this is it. This is 100%. So that combo of the extension everyone already has, this gives us access to the town square everyone's already spending their time in.
Yeah. And from there, it was just obvious that okay, we got to do everything. Chris basically took his entire company and swapped it over to actions and SDK related stuff. His engineering team has been pushing the specification forward. I had to pull in Nick Frostbutter to really give it some juice. And then it was just go to market, figuring out how do we get to wallets? How do we make this prompt appealing to different products? Chris, you can talk about who you worked with in the beginning of this. But yeah, since after that moment, it was just 3 months of how do you get this to market? How do we get this in people's hands?
It might have been closer to 2, John. I haven't kept close track, but it happened quickly. We got this thing out pretty quickly.
Not a lot of sleep. This is the fastest thing I've seen, just because it was such and I'll be the first one to say this, it's such a dumb idea. It's such a silly, kind of ridiculous idea to use the wallet to inject in UI, but you do that already. 1Password injects that tiny little thing right next to your password that has all your sensitive information, right? Like you already have this concept of Phantom or Backpack or Soulflower in the context of a DApp. But I think being able to overlay that on URLs really just impact this. Look, you can now do stuff on the blockchain from any website in the world. And from there, it was like, okay, that's too big of a vision. How do we get something that we can ship in the next couple of months?
Yeah, it's funny to hear that because I've similarly never really thought about everyone who uses crypto on the internet in any capacity has these Chrome extensions for their wallet, right? So I'm curious to unpack that. What is it about Chrome extensions that allow for something like Blinks to exist? Like what's behind the way Chrome extensions work and how they connect with wallets that let you all build this?
I would just add briefly, we're all kind of at the mercy of the way that the internet works, the way that the browser works, all that. And it just so happens to be the case that this like really ubiquitous technology that gets used on the internet for a variety of different use cases, like the browser extension, is capable of reading from and writing to the DOM. And best practices are always that you get opt-in from the user. They understand what they're getting involved in, from a privacy and usability perspective. But that is like a core capability, and it's just the kind of like dumb hiding in plain sight, because I think often it's like the dumb ideas that are the best. What I love so much about this insight is like Chrome extensions are ubiquitous for sending transactions, over the wire in for secure and safe signing and key custody. In the rest of the world, like we took several years ago, took Dialect through Y Combinator on a previous idea before going into crypto. And like classic YC advice is great. You want to build a productivity app? Don't build an app. Start with a Chrome extension that adds a new capability to Google Sheets. So this is like a well-established behavior and capability of Chrome extensions. This just like powers a huge amount of how businesses get started. Even like my credit card has a Chrome extension that finds deals when I'm like on a checkout page on the internet. So it's just all over the place. Hiding in plain sight is like how I like to describe it. It really, I also want to emphasize this is like incredible way to launch. Like this really, I think, took this launch to the next level. But it's still the case that like crypto desperately needs better mobile experiences. And we're sitting on what I think are really, really great top-notch mobile wallets and other apps that are like, nascent space of other kinds of more specific and opinionated apps. And that's what that we want to see happen next. And Chrome extensions can't really help in the same capacity there.
So I want to ask a question about security, but which is common feedback I got, at least on my post that I was using the shill. But before we do that, let's actually do a brief explainer on how it works. What is an action? What is a blink? How does it use Solana? I think most people probably are somewhat familiar, but I think it'd be good to have like a source of truth for the one explanation to rule them all.
And this is same for how smart messages work, which, by the way, the backstory on smart messages is we had that idea for smart messages at Dialect back in January of 2022. And coincidentally, serendipitously, got connected to Jordan Sexton at Solana Labs and just built everything with smart messages right out of the gates on top of Solana Pay. The way it all works, and the way, let's focus on actions and blinks. Nick Frostbear likes to say actions are the back end, blinks are an opinionated front end. I think this is probably the simplest way to describe the difference between these. So let's talk about actions. Actions are really just HTTP, like JSON API services. We call it an action provider. And this is a really key, like important but simple distinction. Action services do not deliver UI the way that like when you load a website like juke.ag, it's sending you HTML, CSS, JavaScript. One of the biggest questions people have is like, hey, what front end am I building? Because like clearly there's a front end in Twitter. There's this like, link preview with superpowers in front of me, this blink. And the answer is actually just that it's an actions provider. When you're developing your action, you're simply writing backend code and conforming to a specification, basically like a JSON schema. And there's two routes. The first route is, and let's just talk through the user journey. So I'm scrolling Twitter and someone's sharing like a buy my meme coin and it's a swap on Jupiter. So they share like a juke.ag link. And today, if you share a link to a token pair on Jupiter, I don't know if you've noticed, but as you choose your tokens in the swap component, it modifies the URL. So you take that URL, drop it on Twitter, and you'll get a blink that's got a nice image, title, description, kind of like a link preview. But then you've also got like a buy $10, buy $100, buy $1,000, or buy a custom amount. That's the blink behavior. To render that thing as you're scrolling, what happens is Phantom or Backpack or any other wallet now detects that there is a URL that conforms to the like action spec URL scheme. And I'll explain what that is in a sec. We'll get back to that. But the first data call is, okay, I've detected a blink. I'm now going to make a call. And the blink URL, for all intents and purposes, is the URL of an action service, like an action provider. When you make that get call, what's returned is all the metadata around the image URI, the title, the description, and then an array of possible actions. And that might be the buy $10, buy $100, buy $1,000, or buy a custom amount. And that's all in JSON. And then when a user decides what they want to do, so let's say Alice chooses to buy $10 of this meme coin, when Alice taps the $10 button, a post call is made to what is largely, not quite exactly, but largely the same URL, which is like basically same actions provider, but with a query parameter for get me the $10 worth of this. The post request is sent with a payload of what your wallet is. And as John was saying earlier, there's going to be more personalization coming. This is that first point of personalization. When you make this post request, you send your wallet public key alongside the payload. The service then constructs a transaction for performing $10 worth of a swap to this meme coin. It constructs and sends down basically like a prepared transaction. Alice receives that through this Blinks client. And at that point, it gets piped off by the thing rendering the Blink. Happens to also be the wallet it's going to get piped off of. But after that point, you're back in normal dApp land, which is I've got a transaction that's in my web browser and I am now sending it off to a Chrome extension to perform the signing. And then you're back kind of on the rails again. It comes out when it's signed, or if you have a sign and send, it just gets sent directly from the Chrome extension. And that's the full flow there, by and large. There's some details around how we're serving multiple actions, how the URLs of the buttons themselves relate to the base URL you're querying from, but by and large, that's the data flow.
So when the wallet detects the spec on the DOM, it makes this GET request. Is that where the markup metadata comes from?
That's right. That's like the readability, the image, title, description, and options at your disposal, the buttons and other input types.
Okay, and then it takes that and injects it into this link as this preview. And then when you do an action, it's a post request. Now, is it possible for someone to sniff the post request and inject something to it? Like, what is kind of the security characteristics, or what are some of the common concerns you've heard about the security aspect of this?
I can take this one. So in this case, it's the wallet that's making the post request and handling all of that. So it's going to make a few different checks. We skipped over there's a registry check as well. There's a set of like quote unquote trusted sites that have come through the registration process that the wallet's checking. The second is the wallet's also going to check that action URL against their prototypical domain checker. So the same thing that flags you when you go to some malicious site and turns it all red, they're checking that side as well. On Backpack, it even tells you, hey, you're about to, retrieve a transaction from this endpoint, right? And as long as all of those things are true, it's the wallet that's making the post request to the actions provider to retrieve the transaction to ultimately simulate, sign, and send, very similar to how you would if you were connecting to that same DApp at that same domain and connecting to wallet and doing that same flow.
Okay, so like the common let's say response of like, well, somebody can just put a drainer link here. It's like, well, actually they need to register first, and at first it's trusted, obviously, understandably, during the earlier days. Is that right?
So in this case, there's a registration process where the team is sort of evaluating each on a case-by-case basis. Ultimately, you want to make sure that there's a good amount of quality control, like double check that it works. Like there's, people are still making mistakes on the spec, all that sort of stuff. But it's still double checked with that registry. So you can't, if this is a known drainer site, it's not going to make it to the registry.
Yeah, Mert, I would add it's topologically very, very similar to the way that someone could spin up a site that drains you as well. It's just the fundamentally different thing structurally is you're on one site browsing your feed and you're seeing transactions from a number of different projects and protocols, but the transactions are still getting simulated and being passed to your wallet. Ultimately, that's the point of signing. And then as John mentioned, there is a URL associated with every transaction in the way that there in the traditional dApp world is a URL associated with every site. And personally, I think this is a really interesting design space where we can, we've got, multiple security providers, including Blowfish, already in the loop, assessing things on the registry and analyzing the URLs these transactions are coming from. But I actually think crypto as an ecosystem is actually in a better position from a security and kind of structural design perspective if we move to a world where, ignoring Blinks entirely, all products, all dApps are actually serving transactions from services, as opposed to sort of the transactions being buried in a pile of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Typically when you press a button in a dApp, it's a transaction gets constructed somewhere in client-side Web3.js. And I actually think we're in a better position as an ecosystem to build new paradigms around security and analysis if transactions are served from well-defined URLs, like from APIs. So it's kind of an interesting, like we've got a lot of work to do there. There's very little in place yet, but virtually all, if not all of the existing security rails are in place. And in this new animal, we've got some great initial conditions started.
I'll add a couple more things too. Like this is definitely a place where we want to improve. I think the use of things like assertion instructions seem like a no-brainer in terms of just general dApp security, let alone Blinks and action security. You combine that with, I think Armani had a great idea around the use of like burner wallets and being able to do that. So I think in it, there's actually a pretty real feature where like a wallet to do any sort of financial transaction may spin up a burner wallet. You immediately just delegate just the amount needed to that burner wallet in the same transaction and use that one to sign. And then that way the wallet in this case can help protect the user. But there's a few different things that we think should exist in the world that we hope this helps sort of foster the development of.
Is there a concern of kind of the Apple Store, Google Play dynamics playing out here? Not from the wallet side, because I mean, it's synergistic for the wallets. But let's say Elon gets mad one day and some app goes viral. And then it's like, well, actually, why are you guys making money on this platform while we don't capture any of it? How do you think about that?
I'll flip that question and put it positively. I think that there's a very rare world where we go to him and say, look, you want to build the town square of everything on the internet, and we have your app store. And it's every single protocol on Solana, being able to do everything from games to governance to payments. And sure, there will be some rules around who can get that top tier treatment. There's going to be some application process or approval, but ultimately the integration is super simple. And the thing that you get from doing that, and sure, there will be a tax of some sort to use this content distribution system. The benefit is that one button on mobile, in Twitter mobile, that gets you that ability to sign and send a transaction. I think that fundamentally changes how we use crypto. So like that's what I want to get. I think we can make a really great case for that obviously at the cost of the 1% or whatever it is on a payment type thing. But yeah, I think that's the world that I want to get to.
One of the things John and I have also talked about is, so I think that's like fantastic North Star. It obviously takes time to get there. And John, I don't remember if this is you or someone else, but I really like this image someone described. We need a thriving Blinks ecosystem. Like we need to create, like any startup is always kind of dealing with sort of unsustainable, sort of messy growth hacks in its journey toward product market fit. And I think like Blinks has the same journey ahead of it. And it's like Chrome extensions injecting into the DOM and like upgrading link previews is a hack. And it's not meant to be like where things should be 5 years from now. What I'm really excited to see is this initial condition has electrified the ecosystem. People are really excited to be building with it. And in the meantime, how do we create great experiences inside the web and mobile products that are Web3 native? So like the wallets and other dApps and new SocialFi products, alongside while we push and improve the experience with these Chrome extensions and find product market fit in these smaller pools of ecosystems and grow that successively outward with like no question. The long-term goal is like Twitter should just natively integrate Blinks, like no question, but there's steps along the way to get there.
When I first heard about Blinks, it, immediately made me think of Farcaster frames, which was, I don't know, February or March that came out. And it's just like a fundamentally opposite bet in some ways, where Farcaster has this platform that obviously frames are never going to get banned from, and is betting that people will maybe leave Twitter and start using Farcaster. Whereas you guys are talking about, hey, let's build this Blinks ecosystem to where Twitter wants us. And I suppose you could put Blinks on Farcaster too if you wanted to, but it's going to be interesting to watch those play out because it's opposite bets on sort of how to build this kind of thing and have it take off.
It's a great prompt. I mean, like I'll give them their flowers. A lot of the Farcaster frames and the actions products that they've developed and the specifications really did help, spur a lot of the thought process along this. In fact, when Farcaster Actions was figuring out their specification, I was like, hey, we've solved this problem already. They're just called Solana Pay Transaction Requests. Here's how they work. right? So I think there's lots of opportunities to both collaborate. Like I would love for every Blink that shows up in X that also, show up as a frame in Farcaster. I just think that the having to stay stuck to one platform, even if it's Twitter, feels like too small of a vision, right? The entire internet knows what a URL is, right? Every single corner of it. That's where I want crypto to be. That's where I want blockchain to be. I can't say like it's only going to be in the social media part. So that's maybe the difference in the vision here.
Yeah, I'll second what John mentioned there, and just say like Chrome extensions in Twitter, it is a growth tactic, and it is one platform. And I think a very big part of Blink's success was the choice of initial conditions. Like a technology does not exist independent of its use and its implementation and the details of how you go to market with it. But it is just one platform. And truly, like the problem that I just like can't let go of at Dialect is just like link previews could do so much more. Like that's really what it is. URLs and link previews. It's like, 20-year-old technology, and just, I think crypto is a way to really, really make it incredible.
When Blinks came out and currently there's only so many things you can do with them. You can, I think the first Blink I used is I bought Bonk on Jupiter because that was like the initial one that was going around. You can donate. We'll throw up a, baldness cures donation link for Mert one of these days. But like John and Chris, people who think a lot about what Blinks could be, like what are the sorts of uses and maybe the uses beyond just like trading tokens that you want to see people create with Blinks down the line?
I'll start with the most straightforward one that we found is e-commerce, right? Like time to action ultimately determines whether or not someone's going to complete a transaction. And you see this yourself when you get a newsletter in your email and you're like, hey, there's a promo code on a sweater, and you have to get there, then you got to log in, you got to, at a certain point, just like, I'm just going to give up, right? But the Baxis one, to bring this example back, the asset was so useful and so interesting to people that they went out of their way. Like I know someone who bought airplane Wi-Fi, got their Phantom wallet set up, went cross-chain just to buy this bottle of whiskey, knowing that it was the only way that they could get it. So I think that distribution and that time to action, I think, is really critical. Now they're set up and they'll be able to just do the thing down the line. But, I think especially in the beginning, we spent a lot of time explicitly not doing payments, funnily enough, because it was called Solana Pay. I did not want to go straight to the easiest version of it. I wanted games. I wanted governance. Like you can vote on a Helium proposal from your feed, right? Super easy. They go straight to their, I guess their demographic, and they don't have to figure out all of the things that they need to do to vote. They can just sign and send, right? Straight from X. Same with, games, being able to get the latest stat of game. Maybe you're betting on a game, seeing other people betting right there, time to action, and seeing that from, someone like Mert or whoever it is that you're following, being able to like, yes, I want to jump in on this as well. Really just enforces like, hey, this is how you can get really, really quick interactions.
Yeah, just like seconding something John said, multiple folks who've been building in like e-commerce for like 10 plus years. I think they'd be fine with me sharing this, but one of the most interesting, like Baxis might still be my favorite Blink I've seen yet. And there's a variety of really interesting ones across different verticals. Another really interesting e-commerce one was Keystone, the hardware wallet provider, launched a collaboration with Mad Labs where you get like your Mad Lab printed on one of their Keystone Pro 3s. They did it through a Blink, and I was talking to their team, and they were like, this is like the holy grail of e-commerce, this kind of like narrowing the gap between the call to action and the action. And so I like very strongly feel with John, we were like racking our brains of like, we got to really make sure we've got a variety of use cases for launch. And the reality is like e-commerce really is just very strongly the one there. The thing I would add to this is less like concrete, but something I feel about crypto in general. Like people often come to me like, Chris, Blinks are really cool. What can you do with it beyond like buy coins and mint NFTs? And I'm like, well, that's true of crypto generally, right? Like this is not a Blinks problem. This is a crypto problem. But like I've actually come around and I don't think it's a problem. And so when people ask me what I want to see with Blinks, I want to see people do more with less. And what I mean by that is like the Baxis whiskey that you could buy, all it did was mint an NFT to your wallet. And so you're minting an NFT, but nobody's going to describe it that way. Like no one's going to say, oh, it's just yet another NFT thing. And so like my gripe sort of like generally with how people talk about what you can do in crypto today is saying that all you can do is mint an NFT is like saying, well, like what else can you do on the Web2 internet but write rows to a database in Postgres? Like it's the same thing. And like what I love about Blinks and why I think this is an interesting design space is people like Baxis and Keystone. And then there's some crazy social and experiments and just like fun, entertaining things people are doing. Under the hood, it might be that you're buying a coin or swapping. It might be that you're minting an NFT. But by bringing it so close to that social layer where people are forming meaning, like capital formation, capital organization, like all this stuff that's like really so interesting and like really cutting edge crypto, that's what I want to see with Blinks is people create these like hyper social interesting experiences off of NFTs or off of coins or off of, you know, anything like that. So we were already seeing the beginnings of that. And I just want to see people like push that even farther.
So
Well put.
how, just real quick, Chris, like how excited are you about non-financialized use cases? Because I was messing around with Blinks and I was thinking like you could have something that costs nothing, but maybe a couple cents would disincentivize bots from, you know, making social media unusable, for instance. And that's not like buying an NFT or buying meme coins or whatever, but it's a use case for Blinks. So, you know, on like the e-commerce to, you know, playing Pokemon with Blinks spectrum, maybe like on the non-financialized side, how excited are you about that stuff?
Just in Dialect's journey, I think I've gone back and forth on this question. And it's kind of like how you learn to like overcome your fear and just embrace your love for the thing. Like I actually think the financial use cases are really great. Now, what I want to see is people like to push the boundaries, like payments, e-commerce, speculation, all great. Like I'm really excited to see people building that. I think the thing that's opened up my mind is like Web 2, the thing that was like underestimated in the 90s was like how powerful the creation of arbitrarily small amounts of information and its distribution. Like everyone's serially underestimated like that. Like you can make an arbitrarily small amount of information and get it anywhere. And now the thing that we're underestimating is the creation of arbitrarily small amounts of value that you can distribute anywhere. And I just like, I've kind of come full circle and been like, the speculation, all of that, it's incredible. Like what meme coins are doing are interesting. I want to see people push those boundaries. It just might be like money and financial in a way we didn't expect. And so I think to answer your question, Jack, like it's good because it can help with like helping against bots, at least the sort of not the ones that are algo trading and all that. But I really want to see people just push the envelope on financial value and the weird stuff people can do with it. That said, governance, all these other things where you're like signing a message, doing something off chain, like please, like we want to see like incredible cool stuff built in that problem space. So just have at it. Like, yeah, just generally all very interesting.
Well put. Well, look, Blinks is the most egalitarian thing we've ever seen. It's incredibly ambitious, and if it works, can reshape the fabric of society. Where should people go to after watching this to start building with Blinks and also using Blinks?
One version of that is you can go to blinks.xyz. There's a landing site there with some documentation, some quick start guides, an inspector, and I'll let Chris give his as well.
Yeah, two websites. Our main website, dialect.to, like to and from, very clever. So dialect.to is just our dev stack. You can get started there. And then a site that's been really fun to see everyone use to both test and validate the correctness of their actions and their Blinks. And that's dial.to. So just shorter version, more shareable. But it's also this super fun, we call it like an interstitial or pop-up. And so as a developer, you can build an action with no website, no mobile app, no nothing. Just build your action in this API, and you can now share that action with people with a dial.to pop-up site. And that is how, for example, Baxis minted their whiskey. And so we'd love for folks to get started there.
I will say one thing, the dial.to site, the homepage has a catalog of every single action that's been registered,
Also
whether or not it's been approved or not. And what's nice about it is you can see there the catalog of literally everything you can do on Solana using actions right then and there, right? So it's really cool to see that. You can get some inspiration on what other people have done. You can try them out if you so wish. But yeah, definitely worth checking out just dial.to.
Great. Well, check those sites out. But otherwise, we'll end it there. Chris and John, thank you guys for coming on the pod. It's been really fascinating getting to hear a bit more about Blinks, and best of luck with working on these down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Mert. It's our pleasure.